The views expressed in the following show are of the host, the guest, and the callers. The content of the following show, its accuracy, authenticity, and the ramifications of the use or application of said content is the responsibility of those speaking and listening, not the broadcast medium.
All right, we are back and we are live. This is Feet to the Fire Radio. I'm your host, James Alphayanchik, the Black Knight of Talk Radio, having all kinds of audio issues with the Spreaker people. So, put this down. Where did that go? Why did it do that? I have to get rid of this. It, for some reason, the audio capture thingy or whatever. Hold on, let me do this. There we go. The whole audio capture thing for Spreaker just didn't work. I'm like, what? And I wonder what that was. A monstrous microphone. So I had to do some on the fly. I couldn't play music because it wouldn't come out. I'm tired. It just never ends. Never ends. I could do this for 100 years, and I'd still have some problem coming up somewhere, somehow. Anyway, we're back here, and we're live. I want to do a couple of news items and then get to what I want to talk about. As you can see over here, Hades or Gehenna, what the hell? What is hell? My title is What the Hell? Supposed to be comic. Nothing really comic about hell, but I wanted to talk about it. But before I get into that, I wanted to mention what I put up on. Let me get to the webpage here. I put this up on my webpage. It's the old Bible studies from the 90s. I talked about it a couple of times, and now I have links to them. I'll put the links down below as well, but there's a web page that has it. What I did was I took these I did back in the early 90s on my Commodore 60 or 128, which was a 80 column ASCII word processor, and I rather than just put those files out, I imported them into a program, made a PDF. Still, the print is. It looks like you probably printed it out on a printer, but this way you can have access to it. Now, why am I doing this? Well, what I'm talking about today in hell is something I learned when I did the study Kingdom of Heaven. Because you remember now, it's at the time, this is in the 90s, I'm in a fundamental Baptist church teaching adult Sunday school. And what I did, made a deal with the pastor. I said, I'll teach it, but I don't want to use like a manual. I just want to just read a lesson. I want to go digging in the Bible and find out answers to questions. And I will use the Bible and the Greek and Hebrew grammar and history stuff, but no commentaries, no documentary denominational commentaries. I wanted to find out what it really meant. And so what I did was I went back and I dug in, and first one I did was, apparently, I thought it was a Sermon on the Mount, but apparently it was Kingdom of Heaven. And the second one was Sermon on the Mount. Kingdom of Heaven, I don't know, it took many weeks. Sermon on the Mount actually took 2 years to do. And so I threw those up there. You can download them. They're PDFs. I mean, they're free to give out if you would so desire. I guess you could print out a copy if you want to read it that way. You don't want you to edit it or nothing, but. And remember, it's back when I was in the Fundamental Baptist. Now, a lot of that stuff I still hold to. I mean, it's not like I turned around and, but it's written in such a way as it'll be familiar to those who have been in a Fundamental Baptist type, or any type of a Sunday school or a lesson. I wouldn't use that format now, personally, but this is what I did then. And for me to go in and to like rewrite it, it would just be huge. I mean, when you look at them, you'll see the exhaustive references that I have on this stuff, and so I put them up there. For those who are inclined, you can download them and read them. And for what I'll be talking about later, a lot of it we found in the study in the Kingdom of Heaven, because the Kingdom of Heaven is somewhat accepted to mean heaven as opposed to hell. And that's not what I found. Now, I went in there, I didn't have any determination on what I was going to find. And what I did find was basically the Kingdom of Heaven is a level of heaven, let's say, that for those who follow the principles of Jesus will go into that section where others will be not in damnation, but will be sad because they, goofed off or what have you, and they didn't do things they should, and therefore they're not going to be aligned. I would use the term vibrationally to be able to exist in that realm, let's say. Anyway, let me let that go for now, but that's there. I want to go to, I'm going to pop onto the Facebook for a second here. Let me turn my Facebook thing on. Couple of things, and I'll get, I notice I got that hell on there. A couple of things. Constitutional Convention. I don't like the idea of having Constitutional Convention. They're trying to do it for the states to try and write things like term limits in there. I think you're opening a can of worms, and it could be taken over. And so Bill Still did a report pretty much saying that and more, and so I thought I would put that up there. Started fooling with music. Yeah, here's a picture of the old days when you can go test your tubes. I got some problems with my tube with my amp, and you used to go down in a corner and just test the tubes. I can't do that now. Thing I wrote, it's interesting that I'm getting a little hello, test, feedback, yeah. It's funny how only Donald Trump can, by not saying anything bad, get her hassled by the mainstream legacy media as if he did say something bad. Because when he wrote out his tweet for McCain, he said he wished prayers and well wishes for the family. And they said he didn't say anything about McCain, so they were hassling. Only Trump could not say something and yet say something nice and still get yelled at. They were waiting for him to say something about McCain, and he didn't, so then they're going to have to nail him anyway, even though what he said was pretty genuine respectfully to the family. So there you go. You can't win for losing. I don't know. I'm not a big TV watcher, but I've also noticed there's a lot of beards popping up on commercials. Commercials, I used to think, and maybe they were at one point, reflected the people and what they're doing and what they like. And so they're trying to be hip and trying to get your product inside that hipness, if you will. But it has come over the years to be a programming tool to sort of program you, this is what hipness is, so you buy their product and you look like they do. And I just didn't get what all the beard's coming from. Somebody had wrote that it was Sharia, but then the women are still, half naked on these commercials, so I don't know. Just keep that up. I don't know, just for the hell of it, it's something about it. Just keep an eye on it. Could be just they're trying to bring around a new thing with beards, but I don't know. I got a suspicion there's something in there. I guess maybe it's okay to have half naked pagan women, but the guy is supposed to have beard. I don't know, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to go into McCain at this point. I'm sure everybody's sick of it, all the accolades or negatives, but just that I have a list of stuff here on Facebook. I'll keep the links below where the media is talking about how great McCain was, but for many years they said a lot of nasty things about him. It's just that when he stood up against Trump, blocked the repeal of Obamacare, something that he actually ran on, and then delivered the Steele dossier to the FBI, then he became their darling. So beware of the media if they like you. Also, for those into music, I'll put the links. I found SoundCloud. I'm working on some of my songs that I've done, and you heard a remix of the one at the beginning. I got a link to that, so you could down. It's pretty high quality. You can listen to it. It's pretty nice. Here we go. This is the picture we're going to have for later. This is will fit into the Gehenna. I got it lined up so you can watch it. Steven Tyler sent a cease and desist letter for barring Trump from playing songs at rallies. He's afraid that people are going to think that he supports him, as if anybody, as I put here, in a comical yet edited way, as if anybody gives a royal or a flying what Steven Tyler thinks. I tell you, these people in media and music, they're really, their own egos have gone to the point where people, wow. And there are people who do think that, which is also, I guess, kind of, what am I doing here? I'm going to turn this down a little bit. Which is also ridiculous that people are going to think that they actually have anything to say. But wanted to mention that. Lost my spot. There's some big hoopla going on in England. I guess it's some kind of carnival, and what the rich people are doing are building plywood walls around their house to stop people from against their acid attacks. I mean, what is going on in England? Sheol is, so there's this article in the Daily Mail about all these people are building, and they're trying to paint them and stuff so they look nice. But basically, they're trying to keep the carnival people out so they don't break in their house or steal or attack them with acid. Yeah, I know this acid stuff goes to the Sharia thing where they're attacking with acid. And I don't know how that's based in the Quran. I know from my experiences with the Bible that people can make anything appear in there. Sometimes they don't have to do any work. It's there. So I also want to mention that for those, I've made a kind of a commitment to go into Minds.com, the Facebook replacement or competitor, and Gab.ai, which is the Twitter competitor. Problem with Gab is they've been booted off Apple and Google. I mean, how's that? No, we just don't want you. Because it's really a freedom of speech thing. And so if people were to use these apps, there's no other than the self-censoring for mature topics, which they do back up. And if you do, put nudity out there and don't check the little not for minor, I forgot what it is, not for minor. Let me see what it is here. NSFW, not. Well, I forgot what it stands for, but it's for minors. You check that little when you post, you check it, and if you don't, then you get in trouble for that. But that makes sense. Just having and this goes in the topic of what's legal, not what is being presented. So you have to go to Gab AI. I got the link there, and you could download the mobile and install it on your phone rather than going through the App Store or for going on Android. Or you could just go to gab.ai and use their web interface. So I look forward to some of you people popping in over there. My name in Gab is F2F. So it'd be @F2F. And in Minds, it's James Arthur Jancic with no spaces. I guess I should have made it all the same thing, but let me just keep going. There's some stuff going on, of course, in South Africa, and I've got some links on this where the spokesperson was asking about if they were going to be killing white people, and they said, quote, we've not called for the killing of white people, at least not for now. Doesn't that answer your question? It's at least not for now. It's not funny. It's absurd. It's where the laugh's coming from. So I have some links based on that. There was an interesting little meme that was there also. I thought it was interesting. If Trump is impeached, Pence becomes the president. Pence pardons Trump and appoints Trump vice president. Pence resigns, Trump becomes president, and then appoints Pence as vice president. Liberals' heads explode. I guess you could do that. I don't remember when Gerald Ford was made vice president. I don't think he had to be ratified. So I guess it was I love that kind of stuff. Now they're talking about Trump is saying he may have to get involved to get to the bottom of Crooked Hill. He may go in there and start to make these files available. He also threatened to do a deal with the Facebook and others of the deplatforming and censoring. So we'll see about that. I do have a link also to an eyewitness. This is Cassandra. She had a blog and was talking about all the problems that she has with echinacea from having drugs and how it damaged her brain. And she was chronicling this. Very intelligent and doing a good job, but it got the best of her and she ended up ending her life. So this is a very good eyewitness, a testimony of what one goes through to the point of finally just saying, I can't take it anymore. It's sad and it's true and it needs to be out there. Helpcast.com is, okay, emails. Yeah, this whole thing with Cohen, I don't want to get involved with it because it's been talked about ad nauseum. Cohen basically pleaded guilty to a non-existing law. Also, he said that he never went to Prague, which is what the Steele dossier claims. So it's just complete garbage, all of this stuff. I have more links about the big pharma and all the poisoning. I'll put those down there. I mean, I'm going to have somebody on about it, and then I can go into it more detailed. Tommy Robinson's appeal has been delayed. The government was ordered by the courts to provide proof, information, and why he was charged, and they blew past that delay and put it up farther. So basically, they don't have it. Also, I got a video. It's pretty good. It's a great speech by Trump. Now, it's draped in the QAnon stuff, but that's just the packaging. If you listen to the speech, it's Donald Trump talking. It's a very good speech. I also put a list here of connecting the dots. This is, again, from the Q folks, but if you were to connect the dots, it's a good point of what they're actually doing and how it's either a big FU to if nothing is done. I mean, if nobody does anything about all the criminal stuff that they have, and it's a good listing of it, that's why I put it there, then it doesn't matter. All it is them actually boasting or bragging about it, going like, yeah, we did it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. So unless something is done about this, and again, I've said it, I think what's going to happen is you're waiting for the midterms. I'm going to turn this off here 1 second. Waiting for the midterms, and then if there's a red wave, then he can fire them all and not worry about the being impeached. Some more diazepam stuff. This is a video. I don't want to blow by this, but I got to get to what I'm going to talk about. There is there's a video put together by Headlines with a Voice, I should say. First, there's this one, and I will put the links below. It talks about how a container company, which is either Russian or teamed up with Russia, which has put together a way to put cruise missiles in a container, and they're getting ports around the United States, this Gulf Tainer company, where they could be actually put these in there, and they're launchable in this self-contained unit. I guess you open the doors and you could launch from them. So you don't know how many are here, if any, and now that the Gulf Tainer is expanding their ports, and so they did a story on it, and then the one person who did look into it from the government has just been charged for misspending campaign funds, which, apparently he did, but, it's probably because, and you got Al Sharpton, who owes $4 million in back taxes, running around free. So what it is, it's all about them having something on you so that if they need to, they'll pull it out. Here's all the proof. Every time somebody comes along and does something good, they go after them. And so once they do stuff bad, but they want them, they don't do anything. It's simple as that. Facebook is now placing trust ratings for users, but won't tell you your score. There's a good one. Oprah Winfrey's channel promotes Shout Your Abortion, where women brag about their abortions. So, Oprah's went over the edge. If she ever wasn't, she is now. And this kind of proves to me that it's not about abortion being a surgical procedure. You don't hear people having movements to shout out your appendectomy. It's obviously there's a whole layer of stuff going on there. And then everyone's favorite, gosh, no, I can't think of his name. I'm looking at his face now, and I can't think of his name. I got to click on it to get his name. Come on. Reality check. Ben Swan, there you go. Ben Swan's reality check, a nice one where he talks about have the Russians hack voting machines. And again, there's no absolute proof, no proof whatsoever it was them. And I like that there. InfoWars being deplatformed. This was pretty nice. Here is a story about a vet who was 100th birthday. He got a birthday card direct from the president and the first lady. He was all quite touched by that. And that's the kind of stuff that you like. Am I saying other presidents haven't done that? I don't know. Okay. But this one has, and I think those little touches are not for, he's not going to get one vote from a 100-year-old guy that he wouldn't have got this card from. And if people do upload it for their own selves and put it out there, how many are they going to actually get? So, and this is a horrible video. I wouldn't even share it except it had a good ending. A lady came by. I'm not even going to look at it. A lady came by and heard some noise in a storm drain, for crying out loud. Pulls out a newly born infant with the cord still around. And but was able to save her. Gosh. So anyway, I think that's going to be, yeah. This is, I made that T-shirt, which actually didn't get too many, too positive. I thought it was kind of nice, but this is where I got the idea from. There was a march in Poland last year where they have no commies, no Nazis, but they have the Polish flag in there. I thought that was very nice, and I did an American version of it. I'll put the links below, but not well received. So they wouldn't even put it up on Facebook at first. I guess they just saw, it's got no Nazis, no commies. How can that be rejected? And then they finally put it up. So let me start on what I'm going to talk about. All right, no, that's left over. I got to find out. There we go. Let me get this. This is a well, or a mine that has natural gas going up on it. And this conjures up visions of hell, lake of fire, etc. And what I wanted to talk about was the idea of hell in the Bible. Yeah, I'm looking at before I go any further, I'm looking at the Stefan Molyneux did a great job of the South African murder stuff, yeah. Okay. So let me start with this. There's a couple of things I want to say up front. And my goal is not to lessen or strengthen hell or any other thing in the Bible. my goal. My goal is to find out, what I think best I can come up with, because I got to stand before God, and I have to figure out exactly what's going on. I have learned I can't trust the church, I can't trust the denomination, can't trust teachers, because all of them have had problems in what they've said. I've listened to them. Oh, I finally found a person who knows, and they go, well, wait a minute, this isn't right. This is contradiction here. What about this? And then their ego comes out, or some type of thing comes out, and it actually, I end up getting disappointed because, I thought this person had the answers. Well, they had some. But to make a long story short, these are some of the givens here. And I guess if I was going to do an actual video series, I'd probably be more linear, patient, and vocal on this stuff and build it. But I can't trust anything in and of itself without having some type of backup. The lack of contradiction has done a very good job of bringing me through studying things. And when I went to study in questions of like hell, okay, actually I bumped into it. I bumped into it studying about the kingdom of heaven, and I ended up looking into it, is that the whole concept of God creating you, knowing you from when you were in the womb, to quote the Bible, and knowing everything, therefore having the pre-knowledge that when he creates you, that you may not be saved and be damned in burning in hell forever. I just can't accept that. It's completely, if that's true in no sense, then God, rather being all-knowing, all-loving, all-everything, infinite, is just a bigger bully, or a nicer bully than Satan. Because if you're going to, and people have justified it, and again, remember, I'm coming from a fundamental Baptist background. They justify, well, God knows. God will provide in your life methods for you to accept, and if you don't, and I just couldn't. I remember talking to my pastor saying, now, take your son. Let's say your son stole some cookies or stole $2, stole $5 or what, because he wanted a toy or something at the store. He's a teenager, young adult, 9 years old, whatever. And you catch him doing that sin, he's now banished from your house for life. You would banish him to, let's say, the Sahara Desert for that. Would you do that? Well, he's like, no. I go, and God being that much more than us, how would God banish someone into hell and so on? And he couldn't answer, which is good, because he didn't use that, well, that's the way God said, and I believe it, and that's it. But as I found out that the concept of hell and damnation that is one that has been created by those who have translated the Bible. Now, I'm not saying there's not a quote hell, and I'll get to this in a minute. I don't want to trip over my own tongue here, but the evolution of the concept is something that has been created going onward. I mean, if you think the Catholic or Lutheran or Baptist, Methodist, any of these guys, they're all different, but they use the same book. And the reason is because there's various interpretations, or they'll listen to a particular leader that is in their denomination who has come up with this particular thing, and then they go along with it. And so what I decided to do was to make the Bible itself, the writings, and in particular the writings of Jesus, used to define the rest of it. And I looked up historical perspectives, looking up the history of the words, what they meant at the times. And I went through this whole long thing. Now, a lot of people probably wouldn't bother to do all of that, but I wanted to know, and I didn't want to just believe somebody, even myself. I don't want to go like, well, I think it's this. Well, okay. No, I want, if it's true, there's going to be, truth is like a multifaceted diamond. And if there's going to be truth, there's going to be, that diamond is going to manifest itself at different facets, but there won't be contradictions. They may be expanding on ideas. Oh, I didn't know that part because I didn't see that facet, but it's not going to contradict this facet, though my interpretation, which I now enhance to explain it all, might be contradicted. So I got to pull that back. If you understand where I'm going. So in the history, if I'm doing this, a lot of this from memory, and I looked up a bunch of stuff that I'll be able to tell you. But in the history of looking at both the Old Testament, the Judaism, and Greek theology because the New Testament is written in Greek from a Hebrew religion and then translated in English and so on. What you have is two Greek words for hell that's translated into King James hell. It's not always translated hell. Sometimes, oddly enough, it's translated a grave, which I think is a better example of it. And that word is, the two words are Gehenna and Hades. Hades probably sounds familiar because it's a Greek word. There's a Greek god, Hades, the god of the underworld. This is where the Greek theology comes from. The word Hades, I'll get to in a moment, but I don't know if you've ever heard of this. There is a Greek translation of the Old Testament. Now, I also want to mention that the Old Testament, oldest Old Testament copy, referring to the Hebrew Scriptures, the oldest one to date is the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is only about 2,000 years old. So there's nothing older on the history of the planet. There's just people saying that these scriptures go back to Moses, and all you have, actually, until the Dead Sea Scrolls, it was probably like 1,200, or no, was it 800 AD? Let's just say 1,000 for the heck of it. That, you know, the New Testament was actually older than the Old Testament in terms of actually having datable paper, well, writings. And so the Old Testament is oldest one is relatively recent, 40s, and they found the. But what they do have is a Greek translation of the Old Testament called the Septuagint, and this is an ancient Greek that goes back before the biblical Greek of the New Testament. And let me go to this picture here. I just opened it up. I just did one. This is not exhaustive. And again, I've already done all of this. You can read it in the Kingdom of Heaven. I'm just giving you kind of a once-over so you understand. I could just come out and say what I'm going to say, but then I would be like anybody else just saying things. I want to explain the reasons. And when you look at here, I lost the... I lost the spot now. I think it was 10, wasn't it? Oh, boy. Here it is. Oh, here it is. In verse 10, because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell. This is an English translation from the Greek Septuagint. And if you look over in the Greek, let's see now, I got to find it. Sorry about that. 10. Here it is. This is the Greek word that's translated hell, and that is Hades. Now we look up in the New Testament, and we have an example in Revelations. The death and hell were cast into lake fire. This is the second death. We look over to the Greek for the hate, well, the new NASB, the version that I like to read, says Hades, because I really recommend the NASB because they've done a lot of accuracy to be able to, seeing that there's a difference between hell and Gehenna and Hades, they've decided to use Hades often and use hell for Gehenna, and I'll get into that in a moment. So you have the word Hades, looking at what the word means. Hades, the unseen world, that's going to be the kind of an ancient definition. Invisible realm, unseen place. If you break the word apart, Hades, it's a, which means not, like atheist is a not a theist, for example. And Idaean, which is to see, you can't see it. So Hades is a place you can't see. That's the literal meaning of it, unseen place. But it has come to meant the dwelling of the dead. When you die, you go to this place which no one can see. And it's not. It is not meant in a good or bad sense. Like you're going, and in Greek theology they call it the abode of the dead. They have a god of Hades, which is Hades. Is god of the unseen place. So they made their own theology on it. But going back just to the word, it means basically an unseen place that you go when you die. You know, and with, as people talk about it, there is this aspect of, Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise, when he was hanging on a cross and somebody was crucified. So they use the word paradise, and they figure, like, well, Hades is got the paradise side and then the people waiting to suffer side. You know, this has all been constructed after the fact to try and explain, instead of saying, like, I don't know. You want to explain it, so they kind of build the theology on it, and this is where you start to get the idea. But if you go back to, you know, and if you look at the actual Hebrew Old Testament, there isn't, in the whole Septuagint, they've never used the word Gehenna. It's always Hades when they translate from the Hebrew words, which would mean, in Hebrew, which would mean the place of the dead. Actually, I forgot the net word. I should have had that Hebrew word ready here for this. So you have this aspect where you have the use of Hades, meaning like the place you go when you die. But in other parts of the New Testament, again, I'm focusing on Jesus' teachings, you have things like, do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both the body and soul in hell. Now, if we look up those words, you look down to the hell, now you get this Gehenna. So you have Jesus using the word Hades and the word Gehenna. Now, to me, where I'm coming from is that if you use two different words, there's a reason. Now, in our case, we use, for example, the word love, right? And if you look up the Greek words for love, you have phileo, you have, what's that? Agape, there's eros. These are all words that can be talked about in love, but they have a special, kind of love. And we being more base in our language, just tend to say love, right? So the same goes. What we have here is, in the earlier translations, they have their own theology that they're keeping with, along with it, and along the way they've read into this all being the same, so they've put it down that they have back thrusted the Gehenna model onto the Hades. And looking up Gehenna is kind of interesting, because apparently the word Gehenna is used in the Mishnah, but not in the Torah. So you have all these the commentaries that have been done in Hebrew are all post-Babylonian. There are no pre-Babylonian commentaries available. In fact, that's one of the great things they like to find, to see if there's any changes that happened in going into the Babylon, which the actual that's the whole point of the holy virus. Let me look on here. Oh, I lost my camera. Turn off. Now, all of these scenarios here are going to be, you're going to have the people are going to be afraid. I remember listening to the Baptists talking about the NIV and the newer translations taking the hell out of the Bible. But you have Jesus' words, and read Jesus' words in Kingdom of Heaven. It talks about those who will be going to heaven still being upset based on their behavior. And so it's not that someone's trying to take the hell out of the Bible. It's that it's trying to be accurate. And so if, in fact, there's a theology which says that when Jesus talks about the unbelievers being cast in the lake of fire, when they talk about the worm that dieth not and all these things, and they talk about Gehenna, there's an aspect of the killing of the soul. That there are theology people who believe that you don't burn in hell forever. It's a way of saying that it will destroy you. So there are people with theology who say that God destroys. I've come out with all the answers to all this, but I'll have to get into that at some time. But Gehenna is interesting because, well, where is it from? It's never used. It's used in the Bible. It's used in the commentaries. Never used elsewhere. So when people try to figure out what it means, because remember, at one point in time, nobody spoke ancient Greek. Not a single person on the planet knew what it meant. All they had was a Latin translation to go back and re-figure out what the Greek was. And then, of course, you had the that stone. So the theory that it is that, and I think it's pretty reasonable, that there is a valley, the valley of Ben Hinnom, some say. Excuse me. Where either they sacrificed people to idols, burning them, or burn garbage, or both. So what I think you have of Gehenna is you kind of have this idea of a big garbage pit, or people tossing, human sacrifices or what have you. Very unpleasant. Very unpleasant, right? So it's not, again, so I'm not exactly taking the hell out of the Bible by saying, oh yeah, and by the way, it means this place. So what you have to do when you read this, and this is why I like the NASB, is because it will help you to understand when Jesus is referring to Gehenna and when he's referring to Hades, because theologically there's different aspects to it. Yeah, no, I'm getting stuff in it. Now, there's people just somebody say, hey, did you ever check out the YouTube what the hell people who have seen hell? Now, I'm not saying these people didn't see that, and I'm not saying anything. That's not my point. My point is that I'm trying to go back. What I've had to do to get through all of the baloney, well-meaning or not, I've had to put my basis on something. And so I have a twofold thing. I have the Bible text, which has been studied beyond all nauseum for people for 1,000 years. and people who even don't believe in God study the Bible linguistically, and those who do. So what we have a history of taking the words of the Bible and sifting them through the smallest, littlest piece of screening to come up with things. And when people say things like, well, the Nicene, back with Nicaea, they weeded out things from the Bible and they edited things and all that. Well, yes and no. Yes, in the Nicene, they voted in books which they think were orthodox, and those who weren't, they were threatened, with being a heretic if you don't agree to it. So, yeah, there's a lot of politics going on. However, the books that were voted out, you can find pieces of them around, and they are very Gnostic in what they're doing. Plus, they don't date back real far. They're unreliable because they burned a lot of the books, and so therefore it's. And these other ones were kept and copied meticulously in all the churches. These other ones are considered heretical, so you've got a degraded copy of it. And plus, if you go back into the pre-first century, you're going to have the proto version of what we have now. The Orthodox and the Gnostics are changed versions of the original Christianity, which split into two schools and then grown over the years. So the Gnostics have gone out there and way out there, and the Orthodox has gotten very legalistic. And so, in other words, you can't really know what it was. So, I find going back into Jesus' words and finding out what they're saying and seeing a non-contradiction there and seeing them pointing to, and then looking through his teachings out into the rest of things, I found it to be a pretty stable, steady thing. And things like a lot of stuff that people talk about is completely irrelevant to what we need to know right now to live on Earth. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is not that this isn't some coffee table discussion, which is some little thing which doesn't matter. This is very important because theologically, it makes a big difference when you're talking about blood sacrifices of the innocent to pay for the guilty, and then having the people who were created by God who have not measured up by whatever reason being thrown in hell forever. I mean, these are very important concepts that I don't think is there. And I've explained, I think I can go theologically what I even think the whole Gehenna part is and what it might be. But now I'm going off, and this would be better off in the resonating with reality section, because I'm going out to come up with a theory that I will put out to explain based on what I know. So I'm stepping out away and coming up with my own picture that I can share with you at another date. But it's important to know that there is, when you die, you know, it says in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, you know, the place you go to, perhaps in a generic, we can't see it, but we'll give it a name, over by there. This is the idea of Hades, which is translated hell, unfortunately, in King James. And you have Gehenna, which talks about destruction. So if you ask me, you're talking about if you are to take the principles that Jesus teaches and you follow them, you'll have eternal life, which means you won't have to go through a death, because you're taking words, you're taking concepts that are undescribable from another realm beyond our understanding, and you're making them into analogs that you can understand. And so Jesus is saying, like, would you, in fact, they asked Jesus says, well, hey, he's teaching pretty heavy stuff about eating your body and blood, and people are leaving, going, who can listen to this stuff? And he says to the disciples, this is in John, says to the disciples, are you leaving too? And he said, well, where can we go? You have the words of eternal life. That was the whole point in the first century, these guys, early, is that this preacher is talking about living forever. And the current theology at the time, the Sadducees looked at, and it's still in modern Judaism as well, they tend to look at your living forever through your descendants. Atheists even talk about that too, where you're going to live through your footprint. So you do things, make a name for yourself, and you'll live through your children and your descendants. And then you had the Pharisees who talked about a literal resurrection. And so now Jesus is talking about, his concept is, no, there's no resurrection, in that you don't die. Your body, you die in the body. Your eyes close here and you continue on. There's no death. You don't wake up somewhere. And this already, the theology from there differs in many religions, which talk about people will sleep and then they'll be risen again. And this is where Paul gets in this, because Paul's a Pharisee. He talks about the resurrection and through his theology. This is why I go by Jesus outward. So I don't consider Paul, nor do I consider like Genesis. All that is all God's word, and that's the way it is. To me, the Bible is inspired by God through humans, and it's been through corruption, and it has to be redone. And Jesus' job in preaching was to go in there and tell it like it was, take out that corruption and tell it like it is. This is why I'm using his words as a basis for my understanding. So that the whole idea of understanding between Gehenna and Hades is not to make it like not easier. Oh, I thought I was going to get to hell. Well, I'll just screw around and kill people, and that don't matter, 'cause I'm not going to go to hell. No. And this is why I think you might want to read the Kingdom of Heaven thing that I have done, because it explains that for those who are going to prosper and go in the Kingdom of Heaven or Kingdom of God, go in that group, you have to actually absorb and live out these principles, not just confess Jesus as Savior. That is the salvation that it's taught to get you out of damnation. But if you actually read the stuff he's saying, the theology is just not correct. And, of course, this makes me a heretic, And every time I open my mouth and this stuff, there's people who agree and it's good, and other people will say you're a heretic, and you're leaving. So that teachings that I taught in the downloadable PDFs I have would be accepted in churches. But if I was going to talk about certain things that come up, the problem is that everyone's wrong. And most people have something right. And I'm not the one who has it all right. Someone, so you're the one that, you are the only one on the planet that realized. No, I think there's a lot of people who do. And there's not a lot of people who are sitting around trying to figure it out in a collective sense. And then if they do, then if they get an ego and they start their own church and now they're on their own path to destruction. I had people asking about starting a church. Absolutely no way. Not a chance. Because all I'm doing is sharing my information that I found, and people can do what they want with it. I am confident in what I have found to at least be the best that I could do with what I know. And the Bible by far doesn't tell you everything. Jesus doesn't tell you everything. But what I've come to make decisions on is Jesus told you what you need to know to get through this life. If you want to have eternal life, you follow Jesus' teachings. Does that mean that nobody can have eternal life who doesn't follow Jesus? I'm not saying that. I'm making no comment on that. I'm saying is, do you want to close your eyes and have a seamless movement into the hereafter, going on an upward mobile, when I'm using the word up and down, higher vibrational, going, I'm using our terms, going up until the next level of positiveness. If you want to do that, read the red letters of the Bible, and you will do that. Follow what is said. Have these principles. Jesus talked about his Holy Communion. Eat my body and my blood. It is given for you for the remission of sins. If you actually take the teachings that Jesus says and you eat them, you will incorporate them into your being, into your blood and bones. And if you drink his life, your blood, the idea is if you drink, he's using the aspects of cannibalism. The concept of cannibalism is you're eating your enemy or whatever, and you're gaining their knowledge. Well, that's why people were getting upset when they were hearing this. But you need to take his principles and do them, become them. Read the book of James. James knew this. He's one of the only disciples, I think, that got it right. And so what we're saying here is that the reason why I'm bringing this up is here are differences in big swaths of theology that don't have anything to do with your salvation per se, but they do show you that there is differences in subtle differences in reason that are huge in here, that if you understand it properly, you have a proper view of God. And I use Jesus for that, to put together that view. Let's see if there's anything. And I saw somebody using the word astral travel. I don't really want to use those terms because, and it's very hard for me to talk about this stuff because our words, and look what's going on politically now, how your words are used against you. It's very tough to convey these things. I'm using a dictionary-based system as opposed to a theoretical, theological based. I'm finding out what the words meant when they said it. There's all kinds of writings that back up what the words are, and sometimes there's only the word appears a couple of times in the Bible, nowhere else in history. So obviously you don't have a reference for that word. Luckily, it's not very important per se, and you can figure out what was meant without knowing that word. But this is where the problem, when people have, well, the Holy Spirit works through me and tells me what to think and not do. Well, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. But you have to be able to differentiate between that's why I did a story about God's will, a talk of God's will the other week. You have to differentiate between your desires, your fears, your programming, what you're reading and seeing on TV and all that, and what God is bringing into your. And let me tell you something. using the Bible as another example, God's words are subtle. You have to be still and quiet to hear them. So these other influences are going to be louder in your life than God's influences. It's going to take effort for you to find it. And this is why you meditate, prayer and meditation, quiet times, getting rid of the noise, undoing the programming of your parents who may have meant well, but they did the best they could in their flawed self. And then you have a flawed environment, flawed schools, teaching theories now and forgetting facts. I mean, you have all this stuff going on you. The good news on that, the gospel, if you will, and this is what I think the word gospel really means. The good news is it's not that complicated. Here is Jesus compacted it down into one sentence. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Do this and you will live. There it is. One sentence. Well, maybe it's two. I don't know. The old original languages are longer sentences. So there you go. Boom. There it is. Now, what is loving God and what is loving your neighbor? That's where we start getting in some of the other principles. And Jesus gave examples of all his parables. That's what I'm saying. All you got to read is Jesus, the red letters, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then John has a little more philosophy. I think John has some of the proto-Gnosticism in there before it went off in the left field, kind of nutty. I don't mean it nutty, but how it got off into a lot of words that don't mean things, you know. And so then throw James in there for some practical application, and you're there. You got it. It don't matter about anything else. All the teachings of Paul and all this stuff to me have brought things from the old way and put it in the new way. What am I reading here? Oh. Now, yeah, destruction, oblivion. Now, here's something that came to me. Now, I hesitate to say this because I'm not saying this is fact. What I've been saying about Gehenna and what's the other word? Hades. These are all facts. All this stuff about where it came from and what the words are and what they think it means, these are all like real stuff. It's not someone's opinion. It's not like some guy said it or an alien told me or I woke up and had a vision. These are researches that's been done by thousands of people over 1,000 years, looking at all kinds of documents and looking at history. So it's pretty straightforward. There is a Hades reference to a place where you go when you die, and then there is a Gehenna reference, which to me is more of a destruction. And somebody in the chat room mentioned about the destruction aspects of it. And to me, it's possible that there might be a destructive phase where they unwind what you've learned. So this is where I think reincarnation aspects might happen, is you may unwind what you've got to a point previous and then go from that point and relearn again. These are all theories. And I not want to put that in here. If you want, I'll do a whole thing on what I think it is. And all the stuff I say is going to line up with biblical interpretation, not denominational interpretation, but historic grammatical applications. And then I build a narrative that fits these points. And that is going to be less strong than sticking to something more consistent. So people want to say, well, what happens when you die? And, well, what happens if you die and you're evil? And, there's two aspects that I have of what you go. And I think both of them have an aspect of Hades and an aspect of Gehenna, where you're going to go to a place of like energy. So if you're a predator or a parasite, you're going to go in your next level to a place full of them with no sheep to shear. That would be considered hell to some, and that would be an aspect of Hades. And there's also a possibility where you can unwind your consciousness, burn off using these ideas of crucible and all this, and burning garbage in Hades, where you could have a process to burn off those bad aspects of you, distill you back down, and then continue growing. These are all theories, and they all make sense, and they all fit in the glove here, and not necessarily pleasant. So that's why I think the whole point about this is not how much money you make, what kind of, if you're pretty or not, if you got a nice house, or those are all material things. And I'm not saying they're bad, but the most important thing is that you follow the principles of Jesus. And the second thing that I have, the second book that I have in there, would be good to read, is the Sermon on the Mount, which I think is it typifies what Jesus says the person with this type of vibrational energy, to use a modern term, will fit into this kingdom of heaven. So this is very important stuff, and this is why I started talking about this now, and I'm doing kind of a, I don't want to use the word sloppy job, but you read the writings, they're a lot more precise. I'm doing this from my own memory, which is good in a way, because this is how I feel and believe, and this is where it comes from, and how I know it inside me. I know it. So I mean, that's good. I'm not, but when you study these things and realize that it don't matter what's going on in the world. We're all going to die someday. We're going to die pleasantly or unpleasantly. But if you have properly grown spiritually, when you do, quote, die, you're not dying. You're going from one room into another, let's say. And this is where a lot of theologies and other religions talk up that I don't agree with. And I can use Jesus' words to say it. But what we all can agree on, without getting into our denominations, is that these principles Jesus taught are things that, number one, things we should be doing on earth. Number one. That's why you could be in like prison or be a lowly slave and still grow spiritually. Perhaps even better, not being tempted, so to speak, not being deluded by property and things or whatever. Or you can be a leader or rich and whatnot, but then it's easier for a needle to go through a camel to go through an eye of a needle than a rich man getting the kingdom of heaven. Well, there's nothing wrong with riches. It's just that it takes you're in an unreal, you're in a reality that's defined by money. You're Elvis, with all your buddies telling you, "Oh, you're a great Elvis, you're great." Yeah, you can look at young girls undressing through a mirror. Yeah, that's cool. You're the king, and you get nutty because you have this kind of stuff. Yeah, and I used to get into astral plane and all this stuff, but I don't, because to me, it doesn't have a value. It is a distractant, and it is potential for destruction when you're talking about that. Not people out there say they're doing it, and fine, that's fine. I'm just saying that to me, it is a distractant. I've dealt with all this stuff. I've had people, and I've dealt with all of this stuff, talking to people and stuff. And it's just like, it's a distractant because it can be mimicked. You can have drug-induced hallucinations. You can be guided meditations. You can have voice-to-skull phenomenon we're talking about. All these things can be duplicated if you're looking externally, even in vision-wise externally, then to building up a internal dialogue with God from within you. That is going to be the better method of spiritual connection than going outside, using some type of hallucinogens or even transcendental meditation. Problem with that is you're emptying your mind in transcendental meditation, so something can come in. You're not trying to empty your mind. You're trying to quiet your mind so that your consciousness can listen to information that will come within you. It's not words. It's not a voice. It's not feelings per se. I can't put a word on it, but I've gotten some things that I go like, hey, I'm getting some insight from inside. Insight, literally. And so this is how I would maintain. And what's important here with this, going back to Gehenna and Sheol, is understanding the actual theology that's being taught here. It's very serious. And just because people go like, oh, well, then heck, now think about this philosophy. Well, if you're saying that, hell's eternal, well, I could just, I'll go there for a while and I'll be done. The idea of eternity, the words they use in Greek is age of ages, referring to ever and ever, that this next scenario has no time limit. There's no time component. And so it's beyond time. And for someone to say, well, I'm going to hurt people and steal and do all this stuff now, and then, well, I'll just deal with a little punishment and then I'll be okay. That's insanity. It's insanity. And so it's best not to wait till those things. I think there's a history of Gehenna. Here's actually pictures where they theorize this could be the actual valley of Gehenna, where these things took place. But it's not important what the actual place was. It's what the principle that's being taught. And what happened at that time is that this place was a good illustration of the destruction that people face if they don't live the proper ways. When you die, all your works will be burned up with you. These are all, you're put through a crucible to be made pure like silver. All these visuals are trying to explain. Yeah, and then Jesus comes along, and not only does he give proper teachings of what to do, he also talks about sending his the Holy Spirit, which could even be him in the Spirit. I mean, there's a whole other theology that's been made over time that I don't care to get into, because it's irrelevant, because people can say, well, this is what I had a lady that I knew for many years. You should go down to Indianapolis, and she was in music. It's not Ann, it's someone else, and she was a Christian, but she believes in a rapture, in a premillennial rapture. It's a theology, and I disagree with that. And she got upset and blocked me and never talked to me again. I talked to her for years. But premillennial, postmillennial, I mentioned it in my writings on there. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, because what we need to do is concentrate on our relationship with God within, and how we do things, how we see other people, how we act. If we're honest, if we're our yes is yes, our no is no, or do we say yes but mean no? I mean, all these things are talked about in Jesus' teachings. Fantastic stuff. I recommend the NASB only because they did a good job of trying to be as accurate as possible. Not as easy reading, let's say, as the NIV, but the NIV has done some, I think, theological decisions are made in there that I don't necessarily agree with. And in fact, unless you can actually read Greek and Hebrew, I think you're going to have several Bibles. So why did Isaiah use the macabre to astral travel? See, this is all, I don't mean that this, I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying there. It's Eric in there. I'm just saying this is all relevant. All this stuff is completely irrelevant to what we need to do in this life to be prepared for the next one. All that stuff's irrelevant. It's all interesting coffee table talk if you have the time and the inclination to kick around these things. But we're going into times now. Look what's going on in our own back door here, not to mention around the world. And, as you get older, you got less time. I mean, I'm 61. I'm looking at the end a lot closer than the beginning. And I realize it's like you have to have these principles absorbed, well-oiled, and naturally coming out of your mind. For example, if you see a little puppy, are you moved by that puppy? You want to help them, or you take them, bring them to shelter, or maybe you keep them. That kind of empathy is godly empathy. If there's someone who would just ignore the puppy because I got them too busy, I got things to do or whatever, or even do harm to them, you see, that's the negative side. That's going to be the problematic energy that's not going to jive with this. And those are extreme examples, but this is my point, is you have to be aligned. Say if you were a person who would kick the puppy off to the side, and I'm telling you that God wants, the reason why you come across that is your God would skin on to help that animal or person or what have you, and you don't do that, you don't have the right stuff. And you need to not only do those things, but you have to feel the reality of those things as good. And the good news in that is if you do the good deeds, you start to create the nerve, we'll say the theological nerve infrastructure to feel the good things. Do the good, the feeling of good comes. That connection with God, it comes by simply doing the stuff. So you can start out doing it as well, I know I got to do it. I don't want to stop, but I better do it. And when you do all of that, what's going to happen is you've grown a tendril directly into God with that compassion. And now you got some God passion flowing in there. It's like you may feel that. And then the next time, it's going to be a little easier to do that. And this is the type of thing that Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about just believe in me and do whatever you want. It's do what I say, absorb it into your being so that it eventually becomes a natural flow out of you back. That's the kingdom of heaven and God. Not just saying a few words and not just doing this. You got to really be it. And no one says you got to be perfect. That's not the point. There's like a naturalness in it, and it grows with repetition. So I think I'm looking at my little notes here. I think I did everything according to the Hades or Gehenna. And so if people say, if you don't accept Jesus as your Savior or you go to hell forever, that does not fit. Okay, it doesn't fit. That doesn't mean if someone believes that, that's fine, because if they believe it, then that means they're going to actually incorporate and do what Jesus says, because he's the master, right? So then if you do that, you start developing this thing. You see how it kind of works? It's okay. It's okay to have different theologies. The bottom line is you have to actually absorb it and become it, and that's where the book of James comes in. You read it's real simple. It's one chapter, I think, I recall. It's a very small book. But here's a guy who, as a human being, got Jesus' teachings and is coming back and exalting other church. I believe, if I recall, James was the leader of the Jerusalem church, the ensemble. I don't like to use the word church. The ecclesia, the called out, the groups that go along with this stuff who signed on to Jesus' principles. Yeah, Gog and Magog. Dr. Jack Van Nippy was a guy I followed for many years. He's still around. He's like 90 years old. He's going out for a big crusades. And it goes into Gog and Magog and coming from Russia and all this stuff. And I follow this stuff going back to the 70s. I've been doing this stuff. And I realized it doesn't matter. Especially since, let me just, since somebody brought it up in the chat room, let me just say for a second. In the theology, you have the Antichrist sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, right? At the same time frame, you have England, the lion, and her cubs, America, supporting Israel, which has the Antichrist sitting on the throne. And so Gog, Magog, Tubal, Rosh, all of these tribes from Russia attack Israel. The kings of the east, the 200,000, march on Israel. So you tell me, you have the Antichrist reigning in Israel, supported by England and America, and you have Russia and China attacking them. So now you tell me who the bad guys are. This is why this kind of stuff is, for example, if you're going to watch some mindless television, this stuff is more, it's more interesting and entertaining, but it's irrelevant. What's relevant is Jesus said X, Y, and Z. I'm learning and I'm incorporating and I'm doing, and I'm going to trust that no matter what happens to me, it's going to be for the highest, best good. So if I'm tortured, God will be with me. If I'm spared, God will be with me. Of course, I'd like the latter. If it was up to God, if it's your will, so to speak. But I want the best what it is. So So this is why I've dropped the eschatology, end time scenarios. I was all into that. I could talk about it. I know about the various principles. When I see people's work on it, I could see the flaws in it, and I just let it go, because it's like if they're caught up in a pre-trib rapture theology, right, and they incorporate the teachings of Jesus, they allow Jesus into their life, they allow God in their life through this Jesus connection, and God works through their life and you become God with skin on. You become a vessel for God. When you see, Jesus says, you see me, you've seen the Father. It's in the sense where the Father had open access through the human Jesus. And that's what you're supposed to be. You're brethren. You're supposed to open yourself so God can have open access through you, so that you can be God incarnate on earth, in the aspect of God can work through me. This way, God is not appearing. The devil works the same way. He gets people to do stuff for him. He doesn't appear, necessarily. So this is the battle going on here. It does. What if heaven and hell are astral plane? It doesn't matter. You see, that's other people who are adept at astral travel and all this stuff. Well, maybe I'm not the guy to talk to, because that's not my point. Well, my point is to do these things here on Earth. There's a story. I don't know if this is true. Martin Luther made a deal with another monk. Luther was going to go out in the world. The other guy was going to pray for Martin Luther in the world. And eventually, at one point, the guy he said, I got to get out in the world too. And when you have the swamis who are up in the mountains and they have all this stuff, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to get out into the physical world. And as you go, that's another thing about Jesus has said, go ye therefore and teach all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. That go ye therefore, if you look at the Greek behind there, it could be linguistically as you go, meaning like if you're a carpenter, as you practice carpentry, live out the principles that I've taught you, and people will see your good works and give glory to God in heaven. You are making, quote, disciples of Jesus by living these principles instead of just talking them as you go into your life. Don't necessarily have to be a preacher, because the greater condemnation goes to teachers. When you got a pastor, you talk about getting more people, and then you do stuff to get more people. You bigger place. You build $1 million cathedrals, and we that way we can serve people better. We can bus them in, and you get lost. You're lost now. You're in a church. You're not doing God. Yeah, see, Jesus is another thing. They edited what Jesus said. And you want to look up Bart Ehrman is a great source of someone who is a textual critic who speaks in layman's terms. And he'll go and tell you that, what words do we know that Jesus actually said? Well, we don't have any physical, historical evidence that Jesus said any of them. It's probable. There's a lot of probabilities, but they have proof that Paul wrote what Paul did, because he was the earliest writings were Paul, not the Gospels. They came later. So Ehrman will say, well, we don't really know. Well, then throw it all out, right? Well, I don't go where Ehrman goes. Okay, we don't really know in a scientific sense. We can't prove that Jesus wrote this or said this. Probable and traditional and, so on and so on. But this is where the inside part works. This is where God speaks to you. So when you read the words Jesus are, they light up in there. That's that inner guidance. This is this self-priming mechanism that leads you to truth. This is why you can read other stuff. The reason why it came out against Q is I think it's baloney. And it's because of the way it's constructed. It's not dark sayings. It's allowing you to fill in the blanks. I'm not going to go into that. I don't want to bring that up in here now. But when you develop this idea of being able to feel, know truth, and it comes out at you, you can do well as you go through the world. But how are you going to learn truth? If you can learn it from science, you're going to find problems because science is now political. How are you going to learn it? Well, I've used the idea of critical thinking using historical context that has been overdone by a million people of all faiths in atheism or not, that that when these things, and there's no lack of contradiction, they all form a right thing, and to me that's solid. Now, I'm not saying you have to have that premise. I'm sharing my perspective with you, using that principle of that solid. So when people say, well, they edited the Bible and he don't know what he really said, what is there in terms of what Jesus said? What's there is enough. And whether there's reincarnation or not is irrelevant, because we're talking about this life. What are you going to do in this life? It doesn't matter about last. You don't remember your last life. And then if you have dreams and visions of a last life, is it really true or not? You won't know if it's true or not until you develop truth sense. So, and again, I say your past lives are irrelevant anyway. Your future is irrelevant. What's relevant is getting through this life, because when you ignore this life and you're done, you can't, well, maybe you can do it again, but you don't want to. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, well, okay, if you do something, if you do something that's wrong, believe something's wrong, do it anyway, is your judgment. Well, there's a built-in, like if it's wrong to steal, and you steal, you could get shot, you can go to prison. There's a built-in mechanism, but you could also get away with it. So now you do it again, you get away with it, do it again. You can get better at getting away with it. You can use lawyers, and you get to be a worse person by actually getting away with it. But yeah, things are built into themselves. The idea is you want to learn what not to do and what to do, so you don't have to go through that trial and error process, which could take multiple lives, so to speak. I mean, Jesus is a shortcut, but it's not, there's no skimping, there's no trimming off on what you need to do. It's a very direct. It's like getting the best route to your destination. And you can go around, you can make longer, you can get lost, you can try for a shortcut by doing things wrong and then get caught up in that aspects of it. This is why when people say, well, there's other ways than Jesus, I don't even get into the discussion. I say, if you want to know the best way to get through this life with the highest best for all involved, you follow Jesus' teachings. I mean, the real teachings, not use it as legally to get around. That's what Jesus talked about. The Pharisees and the lawyers, they translated in some of the newer translations, lawyers, Pharisees and lawyers, because they used the law to get around it. So, well, I don't have to do it. You dive when you look at Jesus' words. Read the Sermon on the Mount. Just go get a. I don't care what Bible. Just get it. Read Sermon on the Mount. Read their lead letters if you got it. Just read it. It's like boom in your face. True. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn, they'll be comforted. All these things, there's a one-liner there. You go like, wow. Well, how are they going to be comforted? Well, how if you're poor in spirit, how is that going to work? Well, keep reading other teachings, and you'll see how it gets a little more verbose. In my opinion, Jesus never said the Sermon on the Mount, probably. What the authors of the narrative did is create, hey, we got a bunch of his sayings, let's throw them together in a big sermon. And so if he never said the Sermon on the Mount, but he actually said those teachings, so what? Whether the Sermon on the Mount literally happened or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is those are Jesus' teachings. How do we know they're Jesus' teachings? Because they're self-validating on it. Now, I'm not saying no one has to even listen to this or no one has to pay attention to this. You do whatever you want. I'm not trying to get converts. I'm not trying to get people to join. I'm just giving this information I got. And this is why I'd like to talk to people. And this is why if you ever want to talk about stuff, give me an email. I got time all day when I'm driving, and we can talk. All right? But myself is going to accept critical, thought-out stuff. I'm not, like I mentioned, whether the astral plane exists or not, it's irrelevant to me. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying it's irrelevant. I'm saying that getting into that is going to take you away from the principles. So if you can actually astral travel and you start spending a lot of time astral traveling, you're spending time away from your family, from work, from doing your helping people, from doing your things, from learning. You see what I mean? It's all irrelevant. That's why I don't get into those things, because I actually did get into those things. So, I mean, I said, nope, this stuff is I just had this, awakening revelation, that certain things are just not relevant. And if somebody is led to do that kind of stuff, I'm not saying, then I'm not your guy. That's all, no problem. You could take whatever I say, part of it, and move on. That's all I'm here for. There's a delay on me. And I keep looping. No, I got good connections. It must be something to do on your end there. So I'm getting toward that ending part anyway. Looking in the chat room, see if I could. Sermon Amount, Key to Success in Life. Yeah, I've never read that book, but it's true. Sermon Amount is the key to success in life, so at least the title is true. And again, I'll put the links below. It's already included in the description, the page that I have my 2 studies I did on. And then you can read it. And just remember where I'm doing it at that point. But if nothing else, the Bible references and the Greek and Hebrew and all that will be of value. So Less Visible is not here today. I did get a generic. He posted publicly that he is recovering, very unpleasant, very harmful. As far as he's concerned, it's still touch and go. But he's going to Mexico for recovering. I don't know why Mexico, but maybe he didn't know somebody there, or I don't know. Whatever. So he's going there to recover. I've not heard from him since then. So apparently, I would say he's doing better. And I think there's somebody that said real quick, the hell's on earth. What we're seeing in front of us is the 2 principles here we have to choose from is, do we want to choose good and love? That means helping one another so we all achieve our best, our talents from God, our creative being, we all help together, versus the other side, which is using everybody to achieve your needs. Do as thou wilt. I will use you to meet my needs, and I don't care about yours. Those are the 2 things. And we're seeing on earth the manifestation of both. And, of course, the do as thou wilt is a stronger negative force, and psychopaths and all this stuff flow up into there, and they are running government. And the people helping one another is a more subtle, down-to-earth, you won't see it on the news much. And so on earth, we're seeing the beginnings of the next level. As people make their choices here to become love or selfishness or hate, whatever, as you do that, there's this split in going to the next level. And whether you'll want to look from a good perspective at the next hate perspective, it could be a hell. Devouring one another, all parasites and predators. And the heaven side is going to be everybody helping one another. We're going to expand into our consciousness. We'll be able to do more. We'll have more energy. We'll be able to do more things. Maybe we don't have to eat anymore or drink because we get energy from God. I don't know what it is, but we're going to be given more privilege, more things to do that way. And the same applies to the negative, except it's going to have more power to do more harm. So just imagine how that's going to be. So that's, to me, if you want to ask, those are me, are philosophically that, heaven and hell. And obviously I want to be on the let's all get together and help one another side. Yeah, taxes. Jesus says, give to Caesar what Caesar's. Taxes are irrelevant. In fact, getting caught up on taxes is an excuse to sin. And so, I pay my taxes. Call me Mr. Anderson or whatever. From the I just do it because it's irrelevant. It's like I don't want to. If I'm not paying the taxes because they're using it for bad things, and then I go to prison, or they take away other stuff. It's just not worth it. When you give somebody, I'll give you a story. A guy came up to me when I was standing at a bus stop, wanted some money. Yeah, can I get some money to eat? I haven't eaten in a while and all this stuff. And I only had $3. This is a while ago. And above my bus fare, my car broke. And I gave him $2 and I had $1. I figured I'd get a pop. And I already had dinner, so it was late at night, working nights. And the guy took the money and went into a XXX theater. Well, the person met me and said, I need this help. I gave them the help. And what they did with it is the issue. And that's how I look at it with this stuff, is that if I can do anything in a democratic society, democratic republic, all I can do is vote. That's it. I can go out and protest. Doesn't mean they'll do anything. I can write letters. Doesn't mean do anything. I'll do that stuff, but I'll do what I can. And the people who are calling the shots are the ones that are doing the wrong things. And if I, in a karmic sense, I'm in America who's wronged Russia and Russia bombs us, well, I'm in America. I'm underneath the karmic situation here. But those people bombing each other are the ones that are really going to have to deal with it. Yeah, Protestants. I don't listen to all people outside of the Protestant will be saying all this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what religion there is. Imagine if you're religious. It's what is your heart with God. Jesus taught those principles, and Jesus also sent out people to go preach. And they said, "Hey, there's a guy who's given the gospel. He didn't get it from us or you. We try to stop, and he won't." And Jesus says, "No, let him go." He heard it from somewhere else. I'm paraphrasing, but you could look the verse up. It's like it doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is the reality of doing God's will for what it would be like to be this proper being. And so that's why when people say they're Catholic or not or whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, I gotta roll it down here. I got things to do. Before I go to bed to go out back into my own self-made purgatory. That's another thing. Purgatory, you're going to find it in a Catholic church. You won't find it in Protestant. They had to come up with it to kind of explain things. And the kingdom of God, you read my writing on that. It talks about this is where purgatory comes from. Is they kind of go, well, it's not hell, it's not heaven, so here's purgatory. And so, anyway, I hope this stuff's okay because I feel kind of naked in that I'm not prepared like I really want to be to talk about these important things. But on the other hand, I also want to be open and honest, and this is coming out of me. This is not some prepared type of thing, So on one hand, I want to be kind of relaxed and familiar and talking off the top of my head because this is all inside me. On the other hand, I want to provide you with stuff because people just talk. I mean, I turn on the internet and I watch shows. Most of the time I listen to it when I drive. I'll put it on my phone and I'll listen to what they're saying. And man, it just goes on and on. And I go, is this what I'm doing? Oh my God, please, no. And so I all I could do is offer what I can do here. And I'm sure it could be done shorter, more efficiently. And maybe as I do this, I'll be able to put more time in during the day to get all my notes in order. But then again, my whole thing is just kind of stream of consciousness. I just follow the stream of consciousness. And I'm sure people who will listen to this, and my YouTube analysis bears out, they'll listen to it for a while and then they're like, done, And I apologize I could be doing a lot better, but anyway, here I am. So, all right. I will see you guys next time. And if you have any questions, especially about Jesus, Bible, this kind of stuff, if you don't mind me talking about it, I mean, you want me to talk about it, fine. Like Eric brought up about like astral plane and all that. Didn't mean like blow him off. Like, I think he knows better because he's been around for a while. I mean, it's just like I'm talking relaxed with you, like we're all sitting at sitting like at a fireside, we're sitting around having a pop or a beer or whatever. We're sitting around relaxing and we're all talking, and I'm talking to you guys like friends, like just, I'm not talking to you like a teacher to students or an expert to people. We're just talking, right? So that's the kind of style I have. It's not even a style. It's just me. I don't plan anything. So I don't want no one to take, ask you to ask questions. Go, yeah, I'll ask you a question, and then you'll be telling me how it's all wrong. Well, I don't mean to sound that way, but so anyway, I will see you guys next time. Hopefully, I'll have more from Les. You can go check him out on his blogs. He probably will start posting on the blogs before anything else. If you want to know more about him, if you go to feettothefireradio.com, go to the left. I wonder if I got that here. Yeah, here we go. I'll show you. You go to the left, and you'll see About Less Visible. You click that link. Oops. Oh, I double hit. Yeah, so now I got to go back and do it again. Sorry. About Less Visible. And it will give you all his, you'll see all his blogs. And I have links to actual video interviews I've done. In fact, I realized I didn't put the newest one up. I just did a little while ago. So I'll have to do that. And that's there. So, okay, we will see you again next time. God bless. And as Kojak would say, like that there.
Feet